welcome to my first video edition of me talking about the news. I basically have avoided the news for years of my life and just recently decided to try and really re-engage with the news. I think I feel more confident in offering some sort of opinion on what's happening in the world now that my research techniques have really improved in the last 2 years of doing a master's. And I feel like I can hopefully help explain why I've looked at the resources that I have and give you more things to look at that are really of use, rather than me just yammering on about why I think something is good or bad, which I think the internet is full of. So let's start. I'm going to share my screen with you and take you through my thought process with this recent news matter. Okay, so this week the news was absolutely littered with stuff about IUDs. So the first thing I heard this week was Britney Spears. Britney has essentially been she had some sort of mental breakdown as much as I know about it. She had some sort of mental issue years ago. I don't know anything about it other than she's now being sort of controlled using conservatorship, which one of the many things that has happened to her as a result of that is that she was told she's not able to get married or have a baby. She has an IUD inside of her, and when she went to contact the doctors to have it taken out, they are not willing to organize this for her. So my initial thoughts when somebody said, and Britney had an IUD fitted against her will, was me thinking that they'd pinned her down and the doctors were on top of her and they were trying to shove an IUD into her womb. It wasn't quite that when I read up about it. I realized that actually she already had one and they were not taking it out. So I was reading about this on somebody else's Instagram feed, and it's a midwife that I follow. And the midwife said to one of her other midwife friends on her feed, why are women not being taught to remove them themselves? And I was like, remove them themselves? This just made me think, wait, hang on a minute. Surely we need a doctor to do that, because otherwise this T-junction, so an IUD looks like this, right? A T-shaped thing with a little thing like this. And then if it's a hormone one, then there's hormones in it. But otherwise, if it's a copper coil one, then it has copper wrapped around it. I think both of those junctions. So I just assumed that if you try to take something like that out, the T bit here just gets stuck in the otherwise triangular shaped womb as it's trying to come out this way. Anywho, so I needed to look into this. I was like, why is this midwife saying that you can take them out yourselves? This is crazy. So I already knew that IUD fitting can be painful, and that was brought up this week with Naga Munchetty on BBC 5. I think it's not BBC, is it? 5 Live. Is it BBC? Yeah, BBC Radio 5 Live. Yeah. She was saying that she'd had a really horrible IUD fitting experience, and then a bunch of people, as I understand it, called in and said much the same thing. So I was wondering, how statistically frequent is it that women experience pain in an IUD fitting? And when I went to go and look at the scholarship on this, what I found, rather than statistics on how many people experience certain levels of pain, what I found was a research paper that looked at how expectations of pain informed the pain experience. So essentially it was a paper that said that if you were expecting it to feel painful, you would feel more pain than if you weren't expecting it to feel painful. And that just kind of seemed like they were saying that it's mostly a woman's fault as to how much pain she experiences, which I thought was BS. So I also saw something on Twitter about this women experiencing pain thing, and it was this. She had retweeted the BBC's coverage of its own BBC radio show where Naga had said about it being painful, where they'd had experts say having a coil fitted shouldn't be painful. And Criado Perez, this amazing woman here, we'll look at her page, she was like, all right, so, oh God, I'm terrible with Twitter. People say, all right, well, it shouldn't be painful for it to be fitted, but it is painful for it to be fitted. And she did a great Twitter feed about that. And essentially what it came down to was, if it's painful, why aren't we offering pain relief? Which we could be being offered. And they even put that in this BBC article. But the BBC article's coverage kind of sounded like they wanted to backtrack on what Naga had said on the radio show, that they kind of wanted it to sound like, oh, don't be too worried, ladies, you know, it's not painful for everybody, it shouldn't be painful at all, and these are the things that you could do. I don't know, that's just kind of how I kind of read it. Maybe they were basically saying, like, experts saying that we should offer pain relief more often. I don't know, it didn't kind of read like that to me. Mostly because it didn't give like statistics of the likelihood of the various side effects of the IUD being fitted. It just kind of gave like pros and cons of having a fitting without really giving you the information that you need in order to make an informed decision. So it sounded more like a sales pitch than a impartial, which is what BBC is supposed to be, right? An impartial coverage. Oh well. Yeah, so I wasn't too pleased with this coverage, and it just like went on, it just like supported my idea that having an IUD fitted is really painful. However, it didn't explain how you can remove them or if you can remove them. So rather than bother that midwife who had said, why don't we just teach people to remove them, I looked it up on YouTube. I thought there's got to be a video showing how they get removed. So, in this video, it shows how you remove them. Don't worry, it's a 3D rendering. It's not an actual like video. So in this, it shows that, so that tool there, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but I hope you can. There's like a tool at the bottom that is pinching the threads that are hanging out from the IUD, and that's what is grabbing onto it. If it was you doing it yourself, that would be your fingers, not a clasping tool. So then pulls and it collapses. It collapses as it comes out. Oh my goodness. I was just like, oh, that explains how it can come out, because it's going to go from a T shape to a straight shape, or more or less straight. It kind of looks like that, didn't it? And that's how it comes out, which is kind of how it goes in as well, because when they load it up, those the T arms at the top fold in to being like completely straight, basically, and then it sits inside of a tube completely straight, and that's how they put it in. So putting it in could potentially be like the largest diameter width of the thing that goes inside the cervix, so potentially might explain it being more reliably painful. But essentially, like, having it removed is like akin to taking out a tampon, is what like this video seems to imply. Still, I felt skeptical. So I went from there, this whole idea, to surely it must be risky. Like if it's, even though it collapses, like maybe there's some risk involved, and maybe that's why we're not being taught it. So I looked at this reference here. I might use a pink pen for this. I looked at this reference here. Diana Green Foster and friends. Interesting experience with IUD self-removal. Like, okay, what's self-removal? What's this all about then? So she says, and she's quoted then on WebMD, she says, it's not that it's painful, it's just that sometimes you're not successful because you can't find a string. And she says that there's no additional risk in trying to remove it yourself than if a doctor was to do it, which blows my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Okay, so among those who attempt self-removal, 1 in 5 people were successful, and that came down to the length of the string. They found that when they added even just 1 centimeter of string, it improved the likelihood of someone being able to remove their own IUD by more than 50% per centimeter. Okay, so, and also, I was like, surely it must be more painful. No. On a 10-point pain scale, women who attempted self-removal and succeeded reported less pain than those who didn't attempt self-removal and had a clinician do it. Okay, so it sounds like it's easy to do. It sounds like as long as you can feel the string, it's easy to do, it's not any more painful, and there's no additional risks versus doing versus it being done by a doctor. And by that, I mean, there could be risks, like potentially things could happen that could go wrong, but that they are the same when a doctor does it to when you do it. But of course, with those risks happening, you're the only person there to help yourself. You don't have a doctor there to help you. Potentially that could be enough to put you off. But by the sounds of it, I'm not seeing much research to say that it's a very risky thing to do anyways. So if we can remove them, why isn't this being taught? That's my next question. So for that, I looked at this wonderful qualitative study, which was called She Just Told Me to Leave It, Women's Experiences Discussing Early Elective IUD Removal, from a Contraception Journal. So this was really interesting because it interviewed the clinician's perspective versus the patient's perspective on the same subject. And this said that the main reason why women wouldn't want to, oh no, sorry, that was the other study said this as well. The, Foster said the main reason why a woman wouldn't want to remove it is because they were worried that they would hurt themselves or do it wrong. The main reason why the clinicians said they didn't recommend self-removal is because it would prevent them from having a discussion first about it being removed. And this qualitative thing really captures like how women feel about being told maybe it's not a good time for them to remove it yet when they go to see their doctors. This woman says, I feel like I'm seeing a probation officer, that you have to go every month to do a follow-up, see if you're doing good and if you're supposed to do what you're doing. She says they discussed IUD removal at visits between 6 weeks and 3 months, and the IUD wasn't removed. So this study quite rightfully says where the majority of patients are low-income people of colour, providers must be aware of the implications of placing barriers to IUD removal and their focus on pregnancy prevention. Previous data has demonstrated that demographic characteristics, including race and socioeconomic status, are factors in how providers advise patients about starting the IUD. And maybe Brittany's case might be surprising to you, but unfortunately, we have a very long history of clinicians getting in the way of a woman's right to contraceptive, to ceasing contraception. So we have historically used contraception to try and prevent people who we don't think are capable or the right person to be having more babies, and we support their use of contraception to the degree where we're not even letting them take it out when they want to. And I'll talk more about that yet. So this study showed practitioners thought patients would be grossed out by touching themselves. Like practitioners thought, oh, well, they don't want to remove it themselves because then they'll have to touch their lady bits. But the patient said, oh, we don't want to remove it because we're concerned that we're gonna cause physical harm. And it was that they might remove it without good reason is what they were concerned about from the doctors. And to this point, might I add, that sometimes the IUD, in fact, often the IUD takes a few weeks or even months for your body to get used to it. And therefore, they're concerned that people will start to take them out earlier on and miss that opportunity for their bodies to settle into having an IUD inside them. And so I think that that's a genuine concern. And that is something that clinicians like myself as a herbalist, that's that double-edged sword of education, is that on the one side, it might encourage somebody to take something out when they needn't have, and on the other, maybe it'll encourage them to feel empowered enough to take something out when they would like to take it out. And it's hard to get the balance right. So the clinicians in these don't seem to be aware or acknowledge that by keeping the decision in their hands, they are also offering their own opinions on whether they think their patients should be parents, which concerns me that they don't seem to have that self-reflective capacity. Brittney is being told she isn't well enough. Hey, hello, wrong pen. Just wanted to add that B. Brittney's being told she isn't well enough to look after her children. Well, sort of to look after her children, but like to have more children. Even though she could have been offered support in having children, that maybe the average Joe doesn't get, and probably should. If she's like in a situation where her mental health is a bit wobbly, then maybe just give her some extra help with the children that she so desires, rather than tell her, no, you can't have any. So yeah, this problem isn't new. Sorry, some of this has been like accidentally rubbed out. The fertility of people have been controlled for hundreds of years, and generally speaking, it's been people who are of the lower classes, of minority ethnic backgrounds. And you can read more about it in a book called Medical Apartheid. I don't remember the author. Here we go. Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington is amazing for understanding the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to now. And this is a great example in a way, but just happening on a rich white woman instead. For hundreds of years, this was justified through eugenicists who thought that there was a hierarchy of like who the better part of our race and the worst part of our race. And now it's kind of, although eugenics is a dirty word, largely because of the Nazis, we've kind of internalized it. And so I would say that it's still there consciously or subconsciously. We're making judgments all the time about who we think should procreate or not. I used to joke that people should have to take a test in order to qualify to be parents. And now I'm like, what a ridiculous thing to say. Anywho, now I think, why don't we educate better? Why don't we have better societal systems in place to help people be parents? Why is all the judgment on like as if you're like born a good parent or a bad parent? No, why don't we have lessons on parenting? Anyways, that's a whole nother subject. So yeah, I thought that this was interesting to learn that Brittney's got an IUD and that she could just take out herself anytime. That blows my mind. B, we could be taught to remove our IUDs. C, we should be offered pain relief as just par for the core when an IUD is being fitted. Nobody would say, oh, we're going to take out that tooth today, but you don't have any pain relief. Why? And what are the conclusions from this? Oh yeah, that people don't want you to tell other people that you had a painful IUD experience when it can be so common. And we actually I have 2 blogs that I'd like to bring your attention to. Yeah, that one. I would love it if you could share your experiences of having an IUD fitted or removed at the bottom of this page that I created, which looks at the history of the IUD. I just realized that I'm no longer sharing my screen with you. Dummy. Here we go. Yeah, share it at the bottom of this. I'll leave a link underneath the video so that you can find that. And then, yeah, under here, people have already started to do it. This, by the way, could potentially become a wonderful oral history resource for somebody researching the experience of IUDs from the women's or uterus havers perspective. And then I also have an post-IUD fitting anti-ouch recipe, which is a massage oil that you might want to make when you're having an IUD, in or out. And also want to say that non-hormonal contraceptive blog on the IUD gives you the actual statistics, like statistical likelihood of the certain side effects that can happen, whether like how likely they are to happen, so you can make an actual informed decision on whether you want one or not. So I hope that that's been helpful, and if you see some news that you want my opinion on, send it my way and I'll potentially turn it into a video like this.